All right, you two people, it is time for the last of these Wednesday deals. It's actually Thursday this week, which is kind of weird. We've been having Wednesday services, and now tonight we have a Thursday because it's Holy Week. It's the Thursday night we remember Jesus going into the upper room. He washes the feet of the disciples. He is having his last Passover with them. It's a pivotal event. It's so very important. He institutes the Lord's Supper at that time. He says, "This is my body, this is my blood. It's given, it's shed for you." He's basically saying, look, right after we get done with this, it's all going to start to really begin his mission. And so I chose gluttony, which is the last of the seven deadlies, specifically for this purpose, right? And so this is just an online kind of talk about that issue, because I think it's really important one. And even though I think it's one of those seven deadlies, probably of all of them, that doesn't feel so much like a sin as it does like a character flaw. You know what I mean? Like you're overeating, and maybe that's something between you and your doctor, not necessarily between you and Jesus. But as we're going to see, it really has very little to do with how much food you eat, and right, an exact amount, or whether, because you could be glutton and eat tons of food and can't get enough, but you could also be a glutton and really eat little or nothing. You could be obsessed with food, and that's the issue when food becomes not something that you celebrate, and it becomes kind of like that McDonald's commercial. I don't know if you've seen it. And it begins with various people, and they're sort of stringing a sentence together. I'm talking about, like, one person will say a couple of words and then they cut to someone else who says another couple of words, and they're saying these really kind of lovey-dovey things, stuff that I would say to my wife. I love the way that you look, and I love what you do to me, and all those kinds of things. And you're thinking, this is like for like maybe an online dating site. Maybe this is for like another Jared jewelry commercial or something. I'm not sure. And then the one person says, gives it away and says, "I love your special sauce," and it's about a Big Mac, right? And the next frame, the hamburger comes up, right? And she takes a big old bite, and it's like, ho, wait a second. To me, I don't know. I love clever commercials. I love funny commercials, but this one I was like, this is creepy. This is a hamburger, people, and I don't know that we should go there. But that's maybe the kind of begin to think about what gluttony might look like. Now, part of the problem with gluttony itself in that realm of eating too much is that it's not as covert as, let's say, lust or greed. I mean, you could kind of keep that to yourself and have this little secret world that nobody knows about. But if you're eating to excess, I mean, it's going to show up. It's going to show up in your health. It's going to show up in your physical appearance. And that's part of the problem, is that as a society, we look at that issue and we say, "Oh man, look at that person," and we use terrible words to describe them. And the reality is that that person isn't just, about the eating. There could be a physical problem going on there where their metabolism is kind of out of whack. And so instead of looking at it as someone who needs our help and needs to hear the gospel, it needs to hear, we look at him and we kind of throw him in a corner like a leper. And that's something we got to address and look at. And that's why I think it's important to look at these the way we have these different sins and sin in general. Because the thing's got to point at me. Right? What did somebody say? When you point a finger, right? See my finger there? It's pointing at me. There's like how many? There's like four more. This one's pointed back at me. These three, they're all pointed back at me. And so I got to look, as we talked about last week, at the log in my own eye, particularly on this one. Because, again, it's not about gluttony. Is not about, okay, how much food are you eating? How big are you? It's going like, really, what's going on in your heart? And really, it's really saying like what's your passion in life? Like what fills you up and what makes you who you are? That's the issue. That's what's going on. You're trying to fill yourself up with food. It could even be sex. You could be trying to fill yourself up with more power, with more work, right? And one of the authors that I was reading said, anytime you have that aholic at the end of it, alcoholic, workaholic, foodaholic, then you're talking about and dealing with what we're dealing with here. It's where you take something that's good, and food is good. I want to look at a couple of passages and show you where, and this is just two really quick ones. One from Psalm 34. We probably have seen this one, right? Taste and see that the Lord is good, using like a food analogy to talk about how God is and all of that. And we'll get back to that one in a little bit. But Isaiah 25. It says, on his holy mountain, on the mountain the Lord Almighty will prepare a feast of rich food, right? Not low calorie, not tofu, but rich foods for all peoples, a banquet of aged wine, the best of meats, and the finest of wines. So God's saying, look, at the end of time, there's going to be this gigantic feast. There's going to be this gigantic banquet. When the prodigal son returns, the fatted calf is slaughtered. And it's like, yeah, let's go for this. This is awesome. And so food, I think in God's book, food was meant to be a celebration of things, something that we can use to do that, to celebrate his goodness and what he does. The Passover was a meal. And that's what Jesus was having when they had that Last Supper. So it's a good thing in and of itself. It is amazing. It is this great gift of God. God sustained the people of Israel with manna for all those years in the desert. Jesus did his first miracle at the wedding feast in Canaan. How many of his parables does he talk about a feast, a wedding banquet, over and over again? He's saying, look, if this is amazing. After Jesus rose, right? If food was bad and if food was this evil thing, then why would Jesus eat fish with his disciples? Why would he make himself known after he rises from the dead in the breaking of bread? He's having a meal with these disciples, and he shows them who he is. He reveals that he's the risen Savior. Now, why would he do that if food was evil? Why would he use, right, his very body and blood as a way of connecting to his dying and rising, right? He used bread and he used wine. See, it's what we do with it. That's the problem. We twist it, we turn it, we make it from something that brings us together as people to something that separates us. Because when you're dealing with gluttony and when you're dealing with this issue, it's not like, hey, let's go do lunch, let's go hang out. It's like, you know what, I'm going to take all this for myself and I'm going to go and I'm going to sit at my own house, totally separate, and I'm just going to eat. Or I'm going to be separated from people by how I see them, because maybe I, again, in all my sovereignty, have discovered that, you can't eat certain things. And so I become the diet police, and I become the person you want to avoid when you're eating something. And that's just as bad, isn't it? Because I'm super focused, and I'm using it to hurt other people, and I'm using it to make other people feel bad, instead of saying, you know what, yeah, I've got that issue too, man, and I feel this emptiness in my heart, and Jesus is the one who is taking care of that for me. See, because that's the answer to this. See, because what gluttony does, and this is from Jeff Cook's book 7. He says what gluttony does, it takes all the other sins and it just kind of supersizes them. Remember, when you used to be able to go to McDonald's and they'd say, you want to supersize that? And that meant that you were going to get not a giant cup, but like a vat of, right? You're getting a keg of soda for lunch. And it was just crazy. It was this great old big bucket of soda. And we realized that's just too much. And so what does it do? Okay, he says, pride, it longs for applause, but gluttony needs to be a diva, right? Taking it to that crazy step. So it always pushes it over the edge. So envy covets what others have, but gluttony says, hey, every insignificant detail has to be noted. It's not enough to be slothful. Gluttony abandons virtue in excess. Gluttony is salt when the greedy taste their spoils. He said $1 million isn't enough. It's got to be 10 million. 5-year-old wine isn't good enough. It must be 15 years old and French, which I don't get. I'm not a big wine guy. Lust wants another woman. Gluttony, check this out, wants them all. Wrath wants revenge. Gluttony wants the infliction of it to be creatively painful. Now, at its most demonic, he says that gluttony amplifies the other sins and enhances their self-destructive patterns and behaviors. And, he's saying at the end of this, Cook, I want to read a little bit of what he says at the end of here. He says, here's the question. What am I united to? What will I give everything for? In the book, he uses the example of the woman who went, in Jesus, one of his last times with his disciples. Remember that woman came in, it was Mary, and she broke that alabaster jar full of very expensive perfume. This is like a whole year's worth of paychecks are in there. I mean, this is her life. This is everything to her. And she anoints Jesus, his feet with it. She takes her hair, right? Just sort of ditching any kind of self protection or kind of self-image stuff, and just says, hey, I'm all in here. This is my life. I'm giving it totally to Jesus. See, gluttony says, you know what? I'm going to take my life for me. This is for me, and that's the real problem. And isn't that the kind of the essence of sin? I don't need you. I don't need anybody. I got Jesus, and I've got this food, or I got this work, or I got this whatever, and that's going to solve the issue. But the reality is that it's not. It's not. We know it's not, don't we? Come on. We know that it's not. We have to do what the passage in the Psalms says. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Right? Give him a chance. Say, okay, look at what he has done. Look at, especially this week. Look at how he suffered. Look at how he died. Look at how he gave everything for you. Everything. He didn't hold anything back. And so that's why he wants to look at our hearts. Like, what are they attached to? Because let's face it, if it's not him, it's something that will always miserably disappoint us. Right? It'll promise us the world, but it'll give us absolutely nothing, actually, but more hunger for more. And it's this insatiable thing, and it's just crazy. Have you ever felt like so hungry you just couldn't get full? And then after you gorge yourself and and just go crazy, you're like, oh, and you just feel terrible. And you're like, wow, that was supposed to make me feel good, but it makes me feel awful. See, and I think that's why God says, look, Jesus is here to bring forgiveness. That's what you need, right? Acceptance from him, significance through him. Now, one of the things I think he gives us as church is the Lord's Supper, right? He gives us communion, where we come together. We gather around a meal. We gather around his people. That's why potlucks at churches are so awesome, and dinners and barbecues, because we get together and we care about each other, and it's a time to share. And when we have that special meal, right, we remember his body and his blood. We receive that forgiveness. We receive that mercy that he's given to us. We experience it once again, that deliverance that God has given to us. But in 1 Corinthians 11, Paul, initially wasn't happy about how the early church was doing that. Because he was saying, look, what was happening is, he goes, when you eat, you got people who go ahead without waiting for anybody else. So you have one who remains hungry, another who gets drunk. Now I'm reading from 1 Corinthians 11, verse 21. He says, don't you have homes to eat and drink in, or do you despise the church of God and humiliate those who have nothing? What should I say to you? Should I praise you in this? Certainly not. And then he says, here's what Jesus did. He gave his body, he gave his blood, he took this bread and said, this is my body. He took this blood and said, this is this wine. He said, this is my blood, given and shed for you, to forgive you. He's saying, look, I am that Passover lamb, the perfect one, the once and for all one. You don't have to keep sacrificing it every year. I'm the one. The price I will pay will be complete and total and awesome. And that's what will fill you, right? Taste and see, right, that this is good. And it's good on a level that you won't even imagine. See, at that table, as one of the other authors said, at that communion table, there's more than enough. For all of us, for all the world, right? There's more than enough. And that's why we got to be careful, right? Well, like when we do church, when we do that, to make sure that we're not just eating and forgetting about the world. forgetting about the hurting, forgetting about the poor, the ones that maybe don't have the food that we have. So this is a call tonight for us to, again, to just see how good he is, to see that that's really what we need. As we deal with all these sins, we deal with all these hungers that we're trying to fix and things that we're trying to, solve other ways, Jesus clearly comes in and says, here's my body. Here's my blood. It's given for you, shed for you. For you. And I pray that those words tonight and tomorrow, and as you get to Easter Sunday, that they make just this huge difference in your life and in your heart. To know how much God cares about you, how much he loves you, and how much he's with you, all right? Have a great day. Tomorrow, we're going to have another one on just the amazing nature of Good Friday, all right? See you then.